Hi, my name is Divya Chandrasekhar, and I am an associate professor at the University of Utah in City and Metropolitan Planning. And I'm here today to talk about alternative platforms of recovery and self-representation after disasters. Now, when people think of the process of recovery, this is the process they're typically thinking about. A disaster hits a community members get together, create a plan, rebuild their community. But in reality, this is not how recovery happens. More often than not, disasters don't affect everybody and they don't affect everybody equally. Not everybody is included in the recovery process. Let's admit it. People don't often like each other. Not everything is a plan. Sometimes it's a policy document, sometimes it's a list of projects, and sometimes it's nothing. It's just straight to building. And not everything is rebuilt or in the same timeline. And so recovery is really a very complex process involving multiple actions by multiple diverse stakeholders, all driven by their specific capacities to take that action and often in very contested forms, which basically means that recovery has no standard process, which also means that there is no standard representation form. And that means alternative forms of recovery and representation are perfectly normal after disasters. They are to be expected and arguably healthy because you want multiple means and multiple venues and multiple mediums of representing and being heard. And so here I am today to talk about three different non-traditional pathways to representation in recovery. And the first pathway I want to talk about is alliance. This is the process of coming together to increase your resource capacity in a crunch and to be heard in larger forums. And a great example of that is the Neighborhood Partnership Network that came into being in New Orleans, Louisiana, after the 2004 Hurricane Katrina. This is in the US. And what this organization did was it built a consortium of smaller nonprofits, smaller community-based organizations like residents associations to help them to improve their capacity to not only serve their community, but to be heard in larger forums, citywide plans, for example. And so through capacity building workshops, through networking, through training on grant writing, this alliance helped its members to be heard in larger forums. A second way is insurgency. This is stepping outside the normal bounds of recovery planning to be radical in your recovery efforts. And a great example is Urbe Api in Caguas, Puerto Rico. Urbe Api is a community-based organization that has, since the 2017 hurricanes Maria and Irma, basically squatted or taken over abandoned properties in Caguas. And they have repurposed these properties into community gardens, into galleries for their community to use for arts and artists in residence, and to provide homeless shelters. They continue to do this work to date. And so this is doing recovery through your own means outside of a formal recovery process. And third is discovery. This is one of my favorite stories from the 2004 tsunami that hit Tamil Nadu. And this is it's a story from a small fishing village that was going through a relocation planning process with the NGO partner. And midway through this process, that relationship broke down. And so here was the panchayat, mostly male dominated, left in a hole. They were halfway through reconstructing and no money. So in stepped these women of the community who had an existing relationship with a different NGO through a livelihood training program. And the women were instrumental in bringing this new NGO resource into the relocation planning process so it could continue smoothly. And through this process of discovering their own capacity, the women had transformed the way the community, the broader community, looked at them as valued stakeholders in the process, but also transformed the way the women thought of themselves as valued stakeholders in the process. And so these are just three non-traditional ways of finding representation recovery, but there are, of course, many more. Thank you for listening to me. Again, I'm Divya Chandrasekhar from the University of Utah.